Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Chapdelaine. This will be my first meeting of the Executive Committee as President of the MAPC, so welcome. I'll kick it off with a call to order and just a brief reading of our remote meeting protocols. This meeting of the MAPC Executive Committee is being conducted remotely via Zoom video conference consistent with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. This includes an extension until July 15th, 2022 of the remote meeting provision of Governor Baker's Executive Order of March 12th, 2020, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. To provide public access to the meeting while limiting the potential for abuse of video conferencing technology, members of the public may view the proceedings via a YouTube link that's been made available at the MAPC site where the agenda has been posted. Just going to get this little pop up off my screen. So to start, I'm going to call the roll, and then I will ask new members of the Executive Committee to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. So I'm going to call the roll, and for those new members, you'll see that because we're virtual, we have to take all votes via roll call vote. So I'll be reading off this list a few times today, but just to see who we have here. So we have Imai Ayu.
Present.
Thank you. Sharonda Almeida. No Sharonda yet. Colette Alfranc.
Present.
Kurt Bellevant.
Present.
Karen Canfield. No Karen yet. Adam Chapdelaine, I'm present. Jennifer Constable. I see you, Jennifer. Yeah, all right, we'll take that. Tom Daniel. No Tom yet. John DePriest.
Present.
Mo Handel. Tabor Keeley.
Here.
Angie Liu.
Here.
Gina Martinez.
Present.
Steve Olenoff.
Present.
George Proakis. Courtney Rainey. Vandana Rao. Sam Seidel.
Here.
Steve Silvera.
Here.
Monica Tibbetts-Nutt.
Here.
Juan Vega.
Present.
Elaine Vanya.
Present.
And our esteemed immediate past president, Aaron Portman.
Here.
Thank you, Aaron. So with that, why don't we just take a second for new members to introduce themselves. And Mark, you're going to have to make sure I get everybody who's new, but I know the first member on my list, Imai Ayu, is new. So Imai, would you like to start with introducing yourself and saying hello?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Imai Ayu. I am the town planner of Weston. And really just happy to be here, happy to help contribute to MAPC and hope to continue the mission of the organization, which I think does great work.
Awesome. Thank you so much and welcome. Mark, help me out. I'm sorry. My brain is in process.
I'm going to help you out first I'm going to help you out first with a small anecdote because Imai did not say enough about himself. He has had a job to which I can only aspire, which is the housing planner for the island of Kauai.
Wow.
So I just want to say like that's where I'm going next. So
Yep, that's what I used to do. I am born and raised in Hawaii and moved out here for graduate school and just kind of stayed on after that, but finally get to go home for a visit this August.
great.
So looking forward to that.
Wonderful.
That's great.
I'm
Broadening perspectives.
looking at new members and I would see Colette O'Frank from Wellesley.
So hi, everybody. Yep, my name's Colette O'Frank, and I'm going to stay with this international feeling of introductions. I'm Scottish, but have lived here for quite some time. I'm a member of the Select Board in Wellesley and spend most of my time working on transportation. And Amai and I have met each other through the Metro West Regional Collaborative on MAPC, and I'm delighted to be here and help as I can.
Thank you, Colette. Should I just continue, Adam?
Yeah. Thank you for the assist.
All right. Our vice president is returning to the executive committee after a stint prior to her time on the Fiscal Management Control Board of the MBTA, and that is Monica Tibbetts-Nutt. Maybe you can introduce yourself, Monica.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Tibbetts-Nutt. I'm the Executive Director of the 128 Business Council. We do transportation management solutions for the 128 corridor from Burlington down to the Newton-Needham area. I've been in transportation planning for far longer than I would like to admit. As Mark said, I'm returning after all these years. I'm just really, really excited to be here. I've always been such a huge fan of MAPC and especially its members and the impact they've had. So I'm very excited to be back and excited to contribute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And our secretary is also new to that role and to the executive committee, although she served on our legislative committee, and that's Jen Constable.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. I am Jen Constable. I am currently the Assistant Town Administrator for the town of Rockland. Have been here for 3 years. I also concurrently serve as chair to the Hull Select Board. Prior to coming to Rockland, I worked for DHCD and have a background in housing, affordable housing, and community and economic development. And as Mark mentioned, was previously on the legislative committee, and I really look forward to working with everybody in this capacity.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm going to call on one of our gubernatorial members who's new to the committee, Gina Martinez.
Good morning, everyone. I am a Senior Development Director for Beacon Communities. I've working in the development department here. I've been with Beacon on and off for about 15 years, and I've been working in affordable housing for like over 20, I guess. Yeah. So I'm hoping to contribute in any way that I can, but particularly interested to contribute on the housing front where I can, both as an individual and also my company is very supportive of my participation in MAPC. We love the work that MAPC does, so I know that they will support me in any way that I can to bring the resources that we have to MAPC. So I'm very happy to be with you all.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.
And I see, I think one other person who in my mind still qualifies as a new member because he was elected to fill a vacancy only in March and then had to run again 2 months later based upon his enormous record of accomplishment between March and May. And that is Kurt Bellevant from the city of Peabody. Kurt.
Thank you, Mark. I was involved. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development for the city of Peabody, born and raised in Massachusetts. International, our ancestors arrived in Quebec in 1653, so we've been here for a little while. But I was originally with the city of Peabody back in the late 90s and was involved with MAPC back then. I worked in a couple different communities throughout the state, Old Collie Planning Council, Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. So I've been around to a few. I'm back to the city of Peabody. And so I wanted to get more involved and back into MAPC from about 20 years ago. So happy to be here, happy to help.
Don't think I've missed anyone, but if I have, please shout out. So I'll turn it back to Adam.
All right. Thank you, Mark, and welcome to all our new members and our new officers, Monica and Jennifer. I look forward to working with you as well when we get together at our first meeting. So why don't we dive into the agenda? And second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from May 18th, 2022. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, or I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Motion made by Aaron.
Second.
Seconded by Tabor. Seeing no further comments, I'll call the roll and I'll go by first name and I'll leave off the people that I know aren't going to be able to make it today. So we'll start with Imai.
Abstain.
Sharonda. Colette.
Abstain.
Kurt.
Aye.
Karen. Adam, I vote aye. Jennifer.
Abstain.
John. DePriest.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Angie.
Aye.
Gina.
I will abstain.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
George. Courtney. Vandana,
Aye.
Sam,
Yes.
Steve Silvera,
Aye.
Monica,
Abstain.
Juan,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
and Aaron.
Hi.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, next agenda item is the report of the treasurer, Sam Seidel. So Sam, do you want to take it away?
Sure, President Adam. I'm used to saying President Aaron, but President Adam. And hello to everybody. I'm Sam Seidel. I'm the treasurer. And for new members, typically what we do is the income statements from months previous. And this month, we're going to look at the March 2022 income statement prepared by our new finance director, Anna Cole. And I would say generally the numbers are strong. The numbers are good. I think I would only bring your attention to the fact that direct labor was very strong, was above budget, whereas our total administrative expenses were just about right on budget. And that had the effect of driving down our overhead rate for the month of March. As we take that out, the overhead rate is what I like to call taking the temperature, reading the blood pressure of how things are going. When we look at the overhead rate for the year to date, so the cumulative year to date, we're at 116%, which is a little bit below the 118% that we've been approved for the fiscal year. This is March. We will track these numbers through June. We're in the month of June now, so we'll track these numbers through the end of the fiscal year, and our goal will be to end up right on that 118%. Other than that, I would just note that there still are plenty of vacancies in the agency, and that is a project that is ongoing at MAPC, and I know that they are working very hard to fill those vacancies so that people can get to work and bill out on the various and many projects that are going on at the agency. That concludes the treasurer's report. I would entertain any questions or comments or a motion to adopt or accept the treasurer's report, I think is what we do every month.
Any questions for Sam or someone willing to make a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Aaron, seconded by Steve Olenoff. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, call the roll again. Imai.
Aye.
Sharonda. Colette.
Aye.
Kurt.
Aye.
Karen. Adam, I vote aye. Jennifer.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Tabor.
Yes.
Angie. Gina.
Aye.
Oh, thank you, Angie.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
George. Courtney. Vandana.
Aye.
Sam.
Aye.
Steve Silvera.
Aye.
Monica.
Aye.
Juan.
Aye.
Elaine.
Aye.
And Aaron.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. All right, moving forward, the next agenda item is the report of the executive director by Mark. I know we don't have a written report, but Mark is ready to give a verbal report today. So go ahead, Mark.
Yes. Adam, thank you very much. For the new members of the committee, the executive director's report generally comes out every 2 months. So it's not available at every executive committee meeting. There will be a written report that is available in July. I would anticipate that we will probably not be meeting during the month of August. We'll make that decision a little later on. But there will be a written report in July. I would also ask Andrea if she could make sure to send last month's report, the June report, to the new members of the committee who might not have seen it, but it's a good way to catch up on the project, particularly the project work and also the policy work that the organization is engaged in. Today, I'm going to discuss one issue, and it's actually an issue that came up at an executive committee meeting, I'd say about 2 or 3 months ago. And since that time, Martin Pillsbury, our Director of Environment, and Eric Hove, our Director of Strategic Initiatives, have been working very hard on it, along with committee member Mo Handel, who couldn't be here today. But as I think most of you know, Mo is from the town of Needham and represents MAPC on the advisory board of the Mass Water Resources Authority. The MWRA and its advisory board have been evaluating over the course of the past several months the possibility of waiving or reducing what have been historically onerous fees for new communities to join the MWRA. And I should note this is an issue of great importance to the MWRA, to EOEEA, to the commission that oversees interbasin water transfers. And at the center of all of this is another committee member of ours, Vandana Rao, who is very engaged with the oversight of these issues in her capacity at EOEEA. So Vandana, if you have anything to add here, I would please ask you to do so. A discussion at the executive committee that Mo raised actually a few months ago contributed to a lot of research and review by Eric and Martin and others at MAPC to determine if we should have a position on this issue. As you know, membership, I think most of you know, membership in the MWRA has been pretty stable since its creation. Not too many communities joining since that time. One of the reasons for that has been there are very substantial infrastructure costs, but also very substantial fees or penalties to joining the water district. And Eric correctly points out in the chat that we're talking here about the water district, not the wastewater district in this particular case. Also, at the time that the MWRA was first created, we were using, to be perfectly frank, a lot more of the water that was available at that point in time, particularly because end use and also leakage within the system were both much less efficient than they are today. But right now, we are well below our available withdrawal levels. And there is actually capacity in the system not to go wild and admit 40 or 50 communities, but to add additional communities. MAPC has typically been a little reluctant on this issue. And one of the reasons we've been reluctant is because we weren't opposed per se to having new communities join, but we were concerned that many of them would join for the purpose of low density, supporting low density sprawl development in our communities. And we actually engaged in a lengthy, facilitated, actually mediated process with the Consensus Building Institute and the MWRA board and staff about a dozen or maybe even 15 years ago. I remember a former professor of mine at MIT, Larry Susskind, who many of you know, being directly involved in that process. And it was a great process with some good recommendations, but no policy changes were actually adopted at that point in time. So now, once again, the recommendation is being made to reduce or waive those fees for membership. And MAPC has reviewed the situation once again. And we have determined in a statement that will go out today to be supportive of the recommendation, because there are a number of things that have changed since our initial review. One of those is PFAS chemicals in our water supply, and many communities facing an urgent need to exit from their current drinking water system because of the presence of PFAS, either in their municipal water system or in groundwater for those communities that are on wells. Another reason is the dramatic shortage of water in the Ipswich River Basin north of the city. And a third reason is our ongoing support for a major development south of Boston in Weymouth on the site of the old South Weymouth Naval Air Station, now called Union Point, which there has been some development there, but less development, both commercial and residential, than we would like and had proposed and had zoned for. And one of the reasons, not the sole reason, but one of the reasons for that is the lack of drinking water and the lack of connection to the MWRA. The fourth and final big change is the passage of the so-called Section 3A or multifamily mandate, which accompanied the housing choice legislation last year. Many communities are now going to have to zone for additional by right multifamily housing development. And again, while it isn't the sole difficulty or challenge facing that, drinking water supplies is one of the issues. And so for all of those 4 reasons, we have decided now to be fully supportive of the effort to add certain communities to the MWRA system, particularly to help us to address those 4 issues. However, most of those issues involve replacement of current drinking supplies or mixing MWRA water with current drinking supplies, as opposed to a flat out use of additional drinking water to fuel new growth. And in those cases where a community may choose to join mainly, not really to replace their current supply, but to fuel new growth, particularly low density commercial or retail development in the community, we are proposing in our recommendations that EOEEA, both through its interbasin transfer responsibilities and also through MAPC review, pay very close attention to ensuring that any new admittance to the system be accompanied by local requirements or MAPC requirements to ensure that there is not low density growth in that community, which could add to, be deleterious to public health, add to traffic congestion, and also increase GHG emissions, which obviously the department and the agency at MAPC have a tremendous responsibility and focus on keeping low and reducing over time to adhere to our responsibilities under the Global Warming Solutions Act and also the new Roadmap Act that was passed last year. I am going to submit to all members of the committee for your interest a copy of the letter that we are submitting to the advisory board and the board of the MWRA today. It calls for ongoing communication among MAPC, DCR, the EOEEA, and the Interbasin Transfer Commission to try and monitor this new system if it is adopted. But I am very pleased with the work that Martin and Eric have done. I want to commend them for coming up with a great new policy on behalf of MAPC and for sort of re-engaging us in a very, very important issue. I'm looking forward to the prospect of working with them, working with Vandana, and working with other state officials on this important question.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions or comments in regards to what Mark has just shared? Steve, all enough?
Yeah, I had a question. So a lot of confusion on this. So you can join the MWRA for water, or you can join it for sewer, or you can join it for both. Are the fees the same either way, or are they substantially more for joining for water?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know they are very substantial in terms of joining for water. I have a suspicion, and I'll call on Eric or maybe Vandana afterwards to say something about this if they wish. The main principle behind these fees has been that long ago, and I do mean long ago, you know, the communities that are part of the system now contributed substantially to these so-called sinking costs for the system. And remember also when the MWRA was created, our capacity was considerably different. We had not yet completed the cleanup of the harbor. And of course, we are still working on the cleanup of the harbor. And we also had a much leakier and less efficient system. I don't think that this anticipates any change at the moment on the wastewater front, but I do believe it is on the waterfront, and I'll ask Eric or Vandana if they have anything more to add. And that would include saying I'm wrong.
I'll just say on wastewater, Deer Island's essentially at capacity, so they're not really looking to add new towns to the wastewater side of the equation. Really, it's the opportunity they see because they've been so effective working with cities and towns on driving down or increasing the efficiency of the water use through conservation measures. They just have so much water that is available now.
Thank you, Eric. Colette, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, and obviously I'm coming in to this right now, so I don't know a whole lot of background if it's been discussed before, but I'd be interested in hearing, if communities had bought in before, these fees would have been used for something, presumably capital infrastructure or something like that. So how is the MWRA coping with communities joining without contributing to the structure that they're buying into? And just in terms of sort of equality or parity for those communities that did pay a lot to come in, I mean, how is this going to be accepted by the communities that are part of the MWRA? And I have to say Wellesley is one of them. And we are working on PFAS issues, one of them being an expansion of our supply from MWRA, which will cost a significant amount of money from our town to invest in that. And we are considering using ARPA funds for that. And so there are funds here to support this type of work. I'm just wondering, is not fair free, but is that, should there be some contribution to support the costs that you're kind of buying into a system but not buying in? And so I'm coming in really late to this. Apologies if this has already been addressed.
So I'm going to have a few things to say on this, but in response to Colette's good questions. But I want to first call on Eric and see if he has anything to say. And Vandana, I see, has also raised her hand and knows a lot about this subject. Either one of them can go first.
So I think
Vandana, do you want to take the first crack, please?
Yeah, not that I have been at those advisory committee meetings, but those types of questions about whether a new community that's coming in should be paying into some of the debt relief or the debt that MWRA and its communities that are currently members have taken over the last several decades. I think that's where the conversation had really stopped for some time, in terms of any new community coming in should be paying its fair share. I think it seems like there's a recognition now at the advisory board, which represents all the cities and towns that are part of the MWRA system, that the MWRA could serve as a source of water for those communities. In particular, I think the language that they've proposed is narrow. It's not like for everybody, but in particular for those communities that are facing serious PFAS issues that are affecting their public health or will potentially affect their public health. So I think it's a narrow universe that they are discussing opening up this provision, if you will, or this pathway to. So I'm sure there's more of those similar types of discussions, Colette, that you raised that are happening at the advisory board itself before it even gets to the MWRA board. But that's where it seems it's at. And I'll stop there.
Eric?
I'll just add, I wish Mark was on the call. He definitely knows this stuff inside and out. But I think the issue that Colette raises is the main source of opposition or unhappiness with this proposal. I think there are some towns that feel it isn't an equitable policy because even if it was decades ago, they did buy in at a fairly significant cost. So I think that is really the only opposition that's arising, and it's kind of unclear how much that sentiment is shared. I think the other thing I'll just add is, really the mission of the advisory board is to protect the ratepayers. So they are, that's really their primary charge, is to try to keep the costs as low as possible for the ratepayers, for all the communities that are in there. And with additional communities potentially joining, that will help provide some relief to really everybody in the system. I think is one of the key issues.
Thank you, Eric. So we're at time for this agenda item, and we have a couple more questions. So let me ask Mark, are you asking for a vote today on anything?
No, I'm
so
not.
Why don't we take a question from Imai and a question from Tabor, but then try to move on to the next agenda item. So Imai, go ahead.
Actually, that was my question. You kind of hit was, what are we doing next process wise on this? Is this going to come back for a vote or anything for formal recommendation? And then kind of following what Eric said, the conservation measures have been working well from MWRA. Is it reasonable to assume that a community that joins MWRA will in generally be more efficient in their water use and consumption than if they were with their own municipal water supply.
I can take that if I may. So as part of the approval for this transfer, and that approval has to go through the Water Resources Commission at EEA because it's a transfer of water across a watershed boundary line. There are very strong water efficiency expectations that are put on the community that's on the receiving end. So they will most certainly have to meet those requirements. And the whole idea behind that is if you are going to be moving water in an unnatural manner, where it would not have flowed on its own, which is what the MWRA system is. It's human infrastructure that's moving the water from central to western Mass all the way to Boston. But if you're doing that, we want to make sure that you're using it in a very efficient manner, and that water is not going towards outdoor watering, for example. There is a recognition that there will be some outdoor watering, but it's maintained at a sort of a reasonable level. So we want to make sure that only the water that a community absolutely needs and has proven to the commission that there is no other local in-basin alternative, which is a pretty high bar. They really have to show that there's no other place for them to get the water locally, and that the only alternative that they are left with is to bring water from across a basin line. The commission then says, okay, this is a pathway for you to get water and meet your public health needs, but you need to do it efficiently. So in short, the answer is yes, they will be expected to be very efficient in how they use water.
Thank you, Vandana.
Thank
Tabor?
Yeah, so I sit on the wastewater advisory committee to the MWRA, and our sister committee is the freshwater potable water committee. And I guess my concern here would be that a lot of this information that I'm hearing is it's not that it's not true, but that it's only part of the story, and that the MWRA does provide to us as committees some very significant tutorials, and the committees come out and they give us in person or on Zoom some very good explanations of all the details that we're discussing. And I wouldn't want to pretend to know those, but the water that we have now, we're using it 250 million gallons a day. Is somewhere in the 2/3 of what it was originally when the MWRA started. It was up in the 375 million gallons. So it's a significant savings, and the cost of delivering that water is pretty much the same whether you're delivering the 375 or in the 200 million range. So there's a significant amount of excess water that could be sold, and that would go to the bottom line for all. Most of the original members of the MWRA paid in many years ago and are just paying higher rates. However, newer communities such as Stoughton just came on from emergency basis, and they did pay an extraordinary entrance fee for that privilege, and so they're the ones that would be suffering, not all of the communities. So I think there's probably a better explanation than I'm giving you, and it probably ought to come from somebody from the authority that has the knowledge, and it would probably help this group make a decision if that's what we're looking for. Thanks.
Thank you, Tabor. Mark, any quick closeout on this to move to the next agenda?
No, I think we have a long way to go in working with the OEEA, with MWRA, with DCR, and with others on this issue. It is only before the advisory committee at this point in time. It is before them for consideration and possibly for a vote tomorrow. But then, even if that happens, and I don't even think the vote will happen tomorrow, I think it'll just be discussion. It then has to go to the MWRA board, and the secretary and her staff, like Vandana, need to be deeply involved. So we have a long period of time ahead of us on this. I do feel it is an important environmental issue, particularly from the perspective of PFAS, because for some communities, this could be either a solve or a part of a solve, and that benefits all of us. I also feel it's an important equity issue. We have the capacity to serve more of our region, and I think we ought to be doing that, even if Some others have been involved and have staked a claim on the system and paid money into the system earlier. As a Commonwealth, we have to find a way to make these benefits more broadly available, particularly when they are critical public policy issues, such as the 4 that I mentioned, that could benefit from additional communities joining the MWRA. That said, we have to do it carefully and cautiously, particularly so that it is mainly for replacing existing supply rather than encouraging additional sprawl development. And that is something we're going to be working on very carefully with our partners and focused on very intently.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. And
sure.
Eric and Vandana for contributing as well. So why don't we move on to the next agenda item, which is the report of the Legislative Committee. I know Keith, the chair of our Legislative Committee, is going to take a lead and then pitch to staff as necessary. So Keith, why don't you take it away?
Thanks very much, Adam, and congratulations on heading our organization and convening this first executive committee meeting. And the Legislative Committee met last Wednesday, and one of the items that we voted on is on the agenda for the executive committee today. Specifically, we're recommending endorsement of legislation dealing with access to high quality, affordable early education and care. That'll come up next. The first item we'll hear is a general legislative update. And for that, I would turn to Lizzie Wyatt.
Thanks so much, Keith. I appreciate it. It's so nice to see all these new faces today. Welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lizzie Wyatt. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Public Affairs at MAPC, and I'm still wearing my old hat as the Director of Government Affairs for the moment while we engage in that hiring process. So there are a lot of things moving in the State House right now. We're in the part of the legislative session that feels like this full sprint to the finish at the end of July. So we are watching a lot of moving pieces. One kind of case in point, we had prepared letters on some moving bond bill legislation. And before we could even send it up to the building, the legislation changed and the legislature's actually already kind of redrafted a different version of those bills. So now we're waiting to kind of comb through those and figure out what we need to weigh in with the legislature. So I think, the things that we're watching most closely right now are the budget. They, in theory, have to have a brand new budget for FY23 at the end of this month. They very often do not and pass a budget that just covers 1 month of the fiscal year and then actually do the budget at the very end of the legislative session at the end of next month. I haven't seen that 1/12 budget yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see it very soon. But our major focus around the FY23 budget is our priorities around local aid, DLTA, and Shannon. So we're watching those very closely. As I mentioned, there are a number of bond bills that are moving. There's an economic development bond bill that the governor filed. His original proposal included, in addition to bond authorizations, a significant investment of the next round of our state ARPA funds. We had heard kind of through the rumor mill that the legislature was going to kind of decouple those two pieces and advance the bond authorizations alone. That is what they have done. So far, that second round of ARPA dollars do not seem to be on the table this legislative session. We have a number of priorities that we're pushing inside the economic development bond because it's kind of an opportunity to push a lot of our policy and longer term funding priorities. Like I said, they just released a new version of the bill. So we're combing through that right now to see what they might have added and what they didn't. The other bond bill that we're watching very closely is a transportation bond bill. Again, a set of 5-year authorizations for large transportation investments. Another opportunity for us to push a number of our transportation priorities. We always try to push for some of those local investment options inside the transportation bond bill, including one of our major priorities around regional ballot initiatives and value capture, and we will be doing that again. We are also watching very closely the climate legislation, which is currently in conference committee, although the bill is pretty different on the House version and the Senate version of the bill. So we are weighing in there to try to encourage the legislature to pass a number of provisions. The House really focused on wind development, so we're pushing for a lot of those provisions, and then a number of the more clean energy focused priorities inside the Senate version of the bill. So those are some of the major things that we are watching. Like I said, if the government affairs team is a little slower to respond over the course of the next few weeks, it is only because it is just a tremendous sprint to the finish. And I'm actually going to go ahead and tee up our priority around early childhood, but I just want to see if anyone has any questions about sort of the quick general update before I turn it over to Matt.
Lizzie, I just want to share, I'm really concerned that with a potential new Congress in the fall, that already existing ARPA clawbacks are going to gain significant steam.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really worried that the legislature is making a big mistake and risking literally billions of dollars getting clawed back by the federal government. So I don't know that there's anything any of us can do, but I think it's important to keep talking about it because I think they're risking significant funding.
I agree with you. I think, some people, there's like a spectrum of responses to that. I think some people are very, very worried. Some are sort of cautiously optimistic that even if there's a change at midterms, that they'll still, that the administration will still be behind supporting these dollars. I'm somewhere in the middle. I was surprised and not surprised at the legislature's decision to not advance ARPA. I will say we're hearing a lot about all of these very significant surpluses that we've seen in revenues coming in this fiscal year, and that they intend to use those surplus dollars first. Again, it is surprising because the ARPA dollars are essentially use it or lose it dollars, whereas the surplus we could plug into other pots to kind of hold on spending it for a little while. And I will also just remind all of us, it's not surprising that costs are going up. So even though we have these surplus coming in, it's not actually necessarily a net gain because we have to reinvest those dollars into other significant cost overruns. So I am worried about this too. It is something that we have been messaging a lot back to the legislature right now. I think the thing that we would be most likely to see, if I had to hazard a guess on what a clawback would look like, is that Congress would ultimately require states to use some of their ARPA dollars in very specific ways. So they would essentially say, if you have leftover ARPA dollars, you have to spend them like this, maybe as a match on federal opportunities. So I don't know that we'll actually see like a big sweep of those dollars, but I do think if there's a change in the midterms, you might see more constraint on those dollars. I do see Mark has a comment.
Thank you, Lizzie. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything that that Lizzie said here. I think that legislative leaders do not want to do a second ARPA bill now. This is a very high level judgment at the moment. And those are hard for us to turn around, although we might try. I sense, one, that they're just not particularly concerned about a clawback happening. I think as legislators, they feel it would be almost impossible for us to take a vote to pull money back from our cities and towns. And I think they have difficulty believing that Congress would be able to pull money back from states and local governments, even though that is arguably a considerably more ideological issue in Congress than it is in the Massachusetts legislature. I also think that legislative leadership may be somewhat overestimating the ability to use ARPA dollars flexibly. What I have heard say is like, there may be a recession. Our surplus now may turn into a deficit, and we will need to spend ARPA money. And what they leave out of that sentence is, we will need to spend ARPA money to make up for lost state revenues. And it is actually not easy to use ARPA money for that because there are a lot of constraints. It's possible, but it's not easy. So I'd say one more thing, which is we are not helping ourselves because there is no central repository that I am aware of. Maybe Lizzie is aware of it, and she should say so if she is. There is no central repository for how localities are spending their ARPA dollars. And the administration has done a very poor job at explaining how they are spending their ARPA dollars. Note, I'm not saying the administration isn't spending the ARPA dollars. There just hasn't been a really good, clear accounting of how they are spending the ARPA dollars. And as a result, legislators are basically saying, well, there's a lot of money on the table. We don't know for sure that it's really spent yet. So we're not going to give you more until we see some clear evidence that what we gave you already has been spent. So that is a communications issue that I think we need to work on before we can convince the legislature to spend this money. I think it's unlikely that we can tee this up fast enough for them to do it before the 31st of July. But I think it is a reasonable goal for us to try and set up a situation where they might do it early in calendar 23, as opposed to doing what they might otherwise do, which is just going through the budget process and waiting until the fall of 2023. I think that would be really bad.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I don't want to belabor this and let you get to it. I'll just say I think public budget 101 is spend other people's money first.
Yeah.
And they've got it backwards. And you know, it is what it is. But Lizzie, why don't you move to the next one?
Thanks, Adam. I'm glad to do that. So I'm going to turn to Matt Welsh and the Government Affairs team to talk about the legislation that we're asking for a vote on today. And I'll note, this is an issue that MAPC has worked on somewhat tangentially, but more so in recent years. We identified childcare and the childcare sector in several recent reports from the agency, and Matt will kind of talk a little bit about how this particular legislation connects to those. But most recently, we identified it as an equity issue in the State of Equity report and made some recommendations around advancing childcare opportunities, particularly for low-income families and access to childcare. And then it came up in both Metro Common and in our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy report, which is our responsibility to the Economic Development Administration. So that's essentially our economic development outlook for the region. And we identified childcare as a growing need for residents in the region, and then the childcare sector as a growing workforce development opportunity that we needed to pay particular attention to. So this legislation came out very quickly. We knew actually all session long that the House and the Senate were working on it, but we want to be able to weigh in. It is pretty strongly supported by a lot of stakeholders that we've been working with more closely in recent years, particularly in the business community and in the workforce development side. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to tell us a little bit about what's in the legislation for our consideration today.
Hello, all. Good to see some new faces on the executive committee this morning, and congrats, Adam, on taking over the presidency. So I want to start by kind of just naming the bill. It's H4795 S2883, and diving a little bit into the context for this bill. So for a long time, childcare providers have been struggling with a business model that is, quite frankly, unsustainable. It relies on low wages, minimal government funding, and extremely high fees for users. Now, that unsustainable business model was precarious before COVID, but when COVID hit, it exacerbated the challenges that early education and care providers have been experiencing for years. Low enrollment and attendance, high operating costs, and the cost of new public health measures that weren't even contemplated before really hurt the industry writ large, and led to a pretty enormous staffing shortage over COVID. Just to put that into perspective, since March 2020, that has meant that 1,359 programs across the Commonwealth have closed. That's 17% of all early education programs in the Commonwealth, representing 23,000 spots for children. So that's 23,000 spots that we are now short from 2 years ago. The other problem that has been emerging in this sector is that families cannot afford childcare at the current cost. Mass is consistently one of the least affordable states for early education and care, and families will regularly pay between 20 and 40% of their income. Just to put that in perspective of other issues that we talk about quite a bit, folks actually on average are spending about 30% more on childcare than they are rent in the Commonwealth. And given what we know about how high rents are, that is worrisome. And to kind of put figures on that a little bit more, that's about $20,000 a year for infant care and $15,000 a year for care for a 4-year-old. So what does this mean for the future of childcare? It means that right now, when we are depending more than ever on folks re-entering the workforce and good workforce participation rate, it means that it is very hard to enter or re-enter the workforce for working parents. And that means an outsized impact on women, and particularly women of color. So that has become an enormous barrier for them, whether they're entering or re-entering the workforce just to go to work. It's also a barrier for the workforce itself. Teachers in early education and care make low wages, as I mentioned earlier, and those low wages combined with current economic circumstances are continuing to push people out. So if something isn't done, that workforce will just continue to shrink, things will get more expensive, and this crisis will worsen. So what do we need to do about it? This bill was put together through, I think, a long series of conversations, both as part of the Special Legislative Commission, the Special Legislative Economic Review Commission, which released a number of recommendations included in this bill, alongside conversations with the business community and a number of other stakeholders. So the main pieces of the bill are increased reimbursements, so getting to just the resources that providers need to provide high quality care to the number of people that we need to serve. That's going to be achieved through increased or a new rate structure for reimbursement and a sliding fee scale for participants, as well as moving to quarterly enrollment as a basis for reimbursement rather than daily attendance, which particularly during COVID, when you don't know if a kid is going to be sick and come in the next day or what have you, attendance is just not a good measure of capacity for these folks. The next element is an expanded subsidy. So this is going to be kind of by tranches. The first tranche of expansion will be from 50% to 85% of area median income, subject to appropriation. So the legislature has committed to increasing over time investments in this, and we would increase eligibility as those investments increase. Essentially, this would continue expanding subsidies as possible up to 120% AMI. The next kind of pillar of this is operational grants and support for the workforce and the industry in general. Those operational grants would, as the name suggests, help fund the operations of these childcare providers and help them have some stability in what is a very otherwise unstable time. We would also be making investments in scholarship and loan forgiveness programs to incentivize entering the early education and care workforce, as well as making it a priority sector for the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development in their workforce efforts. And finally, to look kind of into the long term, the bill would also set up a task force on childcare as an employee benefit. This is something that the business community has really come to the table on, and I know that they're currently in discussions about what that would look like. And I think that is one sustainable long-term source of funding for some of these needs, in addition to the funding added elsewhere in this bill. It is a comprehensive bill that really gets at all of these unique causes of the current crisis that we're in childcare. And while it certainly doesn't achieve all of what we hope to achieve, it is a meaningful first step and a necessary first step. And there's a general consensus around that from advocates from the business community, from the education community, and from the labor and workforce development perspective. Just to close, I want to just loop in the connections to Metro Common, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and the State of Equity Policy Agenda that Lizzie mentioned. So in Metro Common, this bill is very clearly connected to the recommendation to enable wealth creation and intergenerational wealth transfer. That's on the workforce side. It is an industry that is largely staffed by women and women of color, and ensuring that they are compensated appropriately for their work, which is very difficult work, let's be clear, is really critical and forwards that recommendation. It also forwards the recommendation to improve accessibility and efficacy in the Commonwealth's workforce development infrastructure by increasing opportunity, essentially, to participate in opportunities around early education and care. In the State of Equity Policy Agenda, it forwards the recommendation for affordable and quality education from preschool through college. I think that that's straightforward enough that it needs no further explanation. And then in the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, one of the key goals is to allow residents to have enough resources to withstand 3 to 6 months of economic hardship. So again, this is helping to keep money in the pockets of parents and helping to put more money in the pockets of educators, and also increasing parity between the wealth of BIPOC communities and white people in the region. As I mentioned, staff in early education and care are largely women of color, and would help to increase parity between white folks and those women of color working in this industry.
I do think we need to move along with this because we are a little late. The legislative committee has voted to recommend to you that we endorse the bill. This bill certainly doesn't do everything that the commission recommended, but it goes a very long way toward doing that. This topic area is particularly important topic area in the Senate and with the Senate president. Big support in the House as well. But it's a heavy bill to move across the finish line. So I would very much like MAPC to be engaged on the right side of this issue.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Matt, for that exceptionally thorough and helpful description of this bill that is trying to address what is a very serious crisis. So are there any questions? And if no questions, can I entertain a motion to endorse?
I make the motion to endorse.
Motion made by John, seconded by Aaron. Comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Imai.
Aye.
Sharonda. Colette.
Aye.
Kurt.
Aye.
Thank you, Kurt. Karen. Adam, I vote aye. Jennifer.
Aye.
I think I saw Tom Daniel join.
Aye.
Thank you, John.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
George.
Aye.
Courtney. Vandana.
Abstain.
Sam.
Aye.
Steve Silvera.
Aye.
Monica.
Aye.
Juan.
Abstain.
Elaine.
Abstain.
And Aaron.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
I think Sharonda also voted aye through the chat, so she's with
Oh,
us.
thank you.
So, yeah.
All right, so yeah, we do have a couple meaty agenda items left, trying to wrap up by one. So why don't we dive right into the next one, an update on the strategic plan and DEI assessment by Eric Hove. Eric, you still with us? There he is.
I am. Thank you. Thanks very much, and welcome to all the new members and officers. Really excited for you to join us. I'm Eric Hove. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives. Sorry about my webcam. It's a little funky today, but working with IT to get that fixed. This agenda item doesn't have any action required, just really an FYI. I want to inform you all of what we're up to and get your interest peaked. But As Director of Strategic Initiatives, our next strategic initiative is doing a strategic plan. The last one we did was 7.5 years ago, believe it or not. In that plan, we identified 4 main priorities for the agency that we've been focused on ever since. And as you know, we just adopted MetroCommon 2050, our long-range regional plan. So this is really an opportunity to take that sprawling and ambitious plan and really dive into looking at, over the next 5 years, what in this plan should MAPC try to accomplish? What are the big opportunities, the funding opportunities, the political openings, and our own internal capacity in terms of what we can prioritize and really try to move on in the next 5 years. It is really kind of asking 2 main questions. You know, the first, as I described, is kind of a what should we be doing in terms of the topic area work, which things are particularly effective and timely that we should continue to build on and bring additional staff in to focus on. And the second main question is how. What approaches should we be employing? How should we best be partnering with our cities and towns and our community-based organizations as partners and in coalition to move these priorities forward? As part of the strategic plan, we're also doing a diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment. My colleague Angela Howard, who couldn't be with us today, is going to lead that aspect of the plan as we move this forward. And we are putting out an RFP, trying to bring some professional help, either a single or possibly 2 consultants to help us with both the overarching strategic plan process and then the internal DEI assessment. We're just starting to get the RFP put together. Hope to get that out this summer and bring a consultant or 2 consultants on board by the end of the summer to really start this work in September. Just a couple things on the DEI assessment. You know, really since 2014, with our last plan, we did name advancing equity, particularly racial equity, as an agency priority. Since that time, we've actually undertaken almost a dizzyingly array of different initiatives and projects and work, both changes internally through our HR program and otherwise to advance equity. So it's really an opportunity to kind of take a look at what we have been doing, assess where we're at with these efforts, determine if there are gaps or other things that we could be doing that would be more effective. You know, looking at the culture of the agency, how well are all our staff being supported in terms of career advancement and making sure they have the tools and resources to advance equity really in their work throughout the region. And that assessment, those findings in assessment, will basically serve as an input into the strategic plan, where in the strategic plan, that's where we'll be looking at, you know, what are those main priorities in terms of different changes. And we are looking at both internal work, like how we are structured, how we do our work, and also the external work in terms of the types of work we're doing and approaches that we're employing. So both the strategic plan and the assessment will be a balance of kind of inward looking and also looking at the work we do with all of you and our cities and towns and other partners. Just real quick on next steps. Like I said, we are putting together an RFP. I want to get that out on the street this summer. We're putting together a committee of staff and of board and council members to help kind of guide the overall process. I think there will be lots of opportunity for the executive committee and the council to be involved in this. We want to hear your thoughts and values and thoughts in terms of where we should be headed over the next 5 years. So there will be a lot of opportunities through focus groups, interviews, surveys, and meetings, collecting that input and ideas. And obviously, eventually we will bring it to you for adoption. And we're thinking this will probably be a 9-month process. So really getting the work underway in September, wrapping it up in the early part of 23. So I'll stop there. Let's see if maybe Mark or Lizzie has anything else you want to add to this. And if you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
So just a very important activity for the agency. I'm hoping we can wrap it up in 6 to 8 months. I've usually been proven wrong when I make those deadlines. We will have a staff and board committee as we did the last time. So Some of you will probably be volunteered for that. How shall I put that? And if anyone is interested, I would ask them to get in touch with Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mark. Lizzie, anything to add? Any questions for Eric? All right, job well done, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next agenda item is a project update on the Massachusetts DEI Coalition and DEI Guide by Emily Torres-Cullinane. This is an awesome project that I have some insight into, and I'm really excited for Emily to share it with the group.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm the Director of Community Engagement, a department that was officially formed in December, and I've been with the agency almost 12 years. So I actually know a lot of you, but for some new faces, that's who I am. I'm very excited to present on this coalition, and I actually have some PowerPoint slides to share with you. But while I get that going, I'm just going to ask one of my staff members to please put the new DEI Coalitions Guide in the chat. That way you can kind of flip through while I'm talking as well. Because we all know that when we're on Zoom, we can sometimes do two things at once. All right, so I am here to present again on the Massachusetts Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Municipal Coalition. I'll give you a little story, a little backstory. So in 2020, a lot of municipalities and communities were wondering what they could do to upgrade their efforts in DEI work. And many municipalities hired a bunch of staff. And those staff kind of looked to the field of other municipal staff and were looking and seeking peer support. So in 2021, one of our municipalities, the town of Arlington, had a diversity staffer who was getting lots of calls. I think Medford was probably also getting a lot of calls, in Brookline, because they had established DEI positions previous. And it got to the point where these folks were just, getting so many phone calls and people were asking about best practices, that Jill from Arlington went to Adam and said, Adam, what do I do? There's so many people that need, support and help. And he had suggested, a lot of times town administrators, town managers will get together, over lunch or something once in a while and sort of share those challenges and have that space to really support each other. And so that began in, I would say, March of 2021. MAPC was invited to the table to kind of listen and support, and we became partners in this work. So the DEI Coalition was established. This is sort of what they put out in March 2021, and really speaks to the membership being very much focused on municipal folks that are staff, but also people on committee and commissions. And then they put a line in here about wanting to formalize the group at some point, and that is something that they're exploring. We have chairs. So we have Jill, who's the co-founder, with a chair from the city of Revere, Dr. Maritza Barros, and then the other co-founder was actually from Beverly, but he had to step down. We have a growing number of municipalities that are involved. I won't say this is a perfect, like if you look at the dots and the municipalities, it's not perfectly placed on the map, but I did kind of want to give you a sense of the fact that there is sort of these like clusters of communities that have folks that are part of the coalition. And we do have the island of Nantucket, and we have very much starting to grow some Western Mass folks as well. So it's some numbers. We have 33 municipalities, about 10 cities, 23 towns. We have 54 members. Some of those members are actually from organizations like government organizations, or they're sort of different people within a municipality. We've been meeting every 2 weeks on Friday afternoons virtually. So we've had 28 biweekly meetings since March of 2021. We've had 2 social in-person gatherings. We had 1 retreat, also hosted by Adam in the town of Arlington. And we had 1 DEI guide subcommittee. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. We've had presentations at the state level. We testified at the Joint Committee on Racial Equity, Civil Rights, and Inclusion, a hearing last summer. We were at the MARPA conference in the fall, and then next week we're going to be presenting to the Middlesex District Attorney's Office. We've had various partners and speakers at the table. One of them is actually MMA that we're going to be hopefully partnering with more closely. MAPC's role. So I've been managing this project with Raul Gonzalez. Raul works on REMAP. I know you've heard of REMAP, but it's the Racial Equity Municipal Action Plan, and we're hoping to combine efforts in this year. I also want to do a quick shout out to my new community engagement specialist, Naji Nunali, who's on the line. Wave if you can, if you have a camera on. And then we had a community engagement intern that helped write the guide from the end of the fall into the winter and spring. He's now moved on, but I definitely wanted to give him a shout out. This project has been funded by DLTA and PMTA, and right now we are funded until December 2022. MAPC has had administrative support role. We try to do minutes. We try to sort of help them with their agendas. We help them collect emerging practices. We wrote the guide. We're a strategic thought partner. And I would like to say we're a friend and ally in this work. Lessons learned. So a couple of things here I wanted to highlight. These DEI positions really aren't successful unless they're on the leadership level, not just in title, but in practice at their municipalities. They need to be internal facing. And then when they're external facing, they really do need staff support or committee, residential support to be successful. They need to have a budget. I know that sounds silly, but many of them don't, and not easy to run a program when you don't have money. A common practice is starting with an equity assessment, and actually MAPC just spoke about the one that we're doing for ourselves. This work seems to start with a task force, sometimes rolls into a committee, which rolls into hiring someone, which rolls into hiring a department. And schools and municipalities, although good collaborators, kind of need their own DEI folks. The challenge, it's a huge learning curve. DEI professionals are coming from academic areas or the business community, and trying to learn about how municipalities work has actually been surprisingly or unsurprisingly challenging. There's been too many expectations on these DEI folks, and the work is emotionally demanding. There's been a high burnout rate, and we talk about wellness and self-care a lot. Some needs from the DEI Coalition research. It'd be great to know who's hired, what the numbers are in the state, the guide. So we wrote the guide because there was a need of having lessons sort of written down, some resources and funding around language support and basic bias training. It's not required by the state right now, but it would be great if it did. And state support. There's not like one central office to support this work. And we need to have this group continue so people don't feel alone in the work. There's some opportunities to connect MAPC to all of the DEI coordinators so that we can talk about things like housing, equity and transportation, environment, planning. And there are a lot of partners that are willing to collaborate. So we just have to work on finding them and finding ways to work together. There's a potential federal earmark that YW Boston wants to work with us on. And then the REMAP program, as I had said. All right, so we have launched the guide this month. I definitely want you to take a look. So hopefully the link is in the chat. Very quickly, the guide includes sort of an introduction, defining of this work. It's really written by practitioners for practitioners. And because of timing, I'm just going to keep going quick. But one of the biggest lessons is that the DEI directors and chiefs can't do this work alone. This work has to be done throughout the municipality. And success would be finding different ways to make sure that this racial equity work is very much throughout the municipalities, all the departments, and that it's being implemented through different directors. Again, this is made for practitioners, for practitioners. And I'll leave you with, we have a nice little checklist here. So if you are considering hiring a DEI officer, if your municipality is, these are some questions that you should consider. I just talked to a city the other day and they were saying, "Ooh, I think there's 2 of these that we can't meet." And it is important to be ready to have someone come on board so they can be most successful. So I'm going to just leave you with what's next. The coalition would like to become a little bit more formal in some way. MAPC is doing some more of that DEI research, trying to collect those stats, surveying other municipalities. We're launching the guide. We're going to have a guide event, webinar, fundraising. We're going to be looking into new ways of funding. So if you have any new ways, please let me know. We're going to be joining the REMAP community with the DEI coalition in about a week or so. We're figuring out what MAPC's role will be after December. So I will stop sharing there. I'm very curious to hear if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. That you packed a lot into a short presentation there. And again, I've been able to witness this work via Jill here in Arlington and the work that Emily and the others have done. And it's been really impressive. And I know the folks across municipal government in the MAPC region that have seen the DEI guide have been, have had overwhelmingly positive reactions. I think people see it as something that is going to be immediately useful in doing DEI work at the local government level. So thank you. And it's just the start, which is, it's been a lot of work and it's just the start. So any questions or comments for Emily? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Emily. We really appreciate it.
I just want to leave you with one last thing, which is, again, this DEI work is not easy, and your support is definitely needed in your municipalities. If you have someone that is hired, I invite you to just put out that red carpet and see how you can be the most helpful. There has been so much turnover even in the last year. And I would say, again, this will not get to the peak of being successful unless like many hands get involved and participate in supporting these positions. So just wanted to do one more shout out. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to coming back to this table and telling you more.
Thank you, Emily. All right, with that, I think we're moving to our last few agenda items here. I think this next one is just an announcement or a reminder that the date of our next executive committee meeting will be July 20th, 2022. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, absent further legislative change, that will be back in person, right?
Well, I'm hoping it will be back in person regardless of legislative change. I would like to do an in-person meeting. We have to investigate where. Outside is a possibility. Inside is a possibility, but probably not at MAPC, which is simply our space is too crowded. So we're going to be looking at that. It's a little bit late in the month of July, so we have some time to plan for that. But I am expecting that it's going to be an in-person meeting, and I am expecting that August will probably be canceled.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So hold that date and exact location to be determined. And then the next agenda item is any other business not known at the time of the posting of this agenda. I don't have anything. Mark, Lizzie?
Nope.
Anybody? Last call? Had enough? All right. So I think I have to do one more roll call to adjourn, but I need someone to make the motion and second it. And Aaron's not here to make the motion. Made by John. We have a second?
Second.
Who was that for the minutes?
Tom Daniel.
Thank you, Tom. All right. With that, let me call the roll. Imai.
Aye, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Sharonda.
Aye.
Thank you, Sharonda. Colette.
Aye.
Kurt. Adam, I vote aye. Jennifer.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
George.
Aye.
Courtney. I think we lost Vandana. Sam Seidel.
Aye.
Steve Silvera.
Aye.
Monica.
Aye.
Juan. I think we lost Juan as well. Elaine.
Aye.
And Aaron had to go to a meeting as well. The meeting is formally adjourned, and thank you everybody for your time. And we packed a lot into an hour and a half. We appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.